Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel NewsX USA. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today we are diving into one of the most daring episodes of the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, the strike that set ablaze towers in Moscow. We will take you through every angle: exterior, interior, performance, safety features, unique selling points and price, and then wrap up with our conclusion. Starting with the exterior, the images are dramatic. The towers in Moscow, symbolic high rises in a major city, were struck. Flames leapt from the upper levels, thick black smoke billowed into the skyline, sirens sounded and emergency services rushed to the scene. On the face of it, this operation shows just how deep into enemy territory Ukraine's capabilities now extend. The exterior damage is not simply superficial. The windows shattered, facades melted or scorched, structural elements caught the fire, and some external installations collapsed or were heavily damaged. The fact that this strike occurred in Moscow signals a powerful message. No longer are the attacks limited to remote border areas or front lines. This reached the heart of Russia's capital, where the expectation of relative safety is higher. Visually, it's shocking, but strategically, it underscores a change in the dynamic. For residents and observers, the burning towers are a wake-up call. The external scene also reveals the limitations of air defense systems. Even in a heavily protected urban environment, gaps were found, exploited, and the attackers found targets. In short, the exterior tells us that Ukraine has not only reached inside Russian territory, but found urban targets and executed. The sight of the towers with flames at night, emergency crews scrambling, and adjacent buildings being evacuated all contribute to the stark reality that war is now closer, more visible, more dramatic. We see external damage done, we see a city in high alarm, and we see the boldness of the action. Turning now to the interior, and this is perhaps the most important and most revealing part of the story. When we talk interior, here we mean two things: the interior of the buildings themselves, what happened inside the towers, and the interior of the strategy, the internal planning, execution, and effects. On the building interior side, imagine corridors filled with smoke, sprinklers activated or perhaps failed, alarms blaring, office spaces charred, ceilings collapsing, lights out, people evacuated in panic. Inside those towers, workers, residents, security personnel, and first responders found themselves suddenly in a war's own scenario inside one of Russia's high-rise structures. The shock of seeing fire rising from upper floors, escape routes blocked, stairwells smoke filled, elevators out of service, emergency lighting flickering or gone altogether. That's the reality when a building in a major city is directly targeted. Think of meeting rooms shattered, glass rained down in lobbies, furniture ablaze, offices compromised, server rooms flooded, data centers disrupted. The human dimension is intense. Individuals inside had to respond quickly, follow evacuation plans, maybe don gas masks or go to protected zones. Firefighters had to gain access despite dense smoke. High-rise firefighting is notoriously difficult. Getting equipment up to upper floors, stiff wind conditions, risk of collapse or explosion. Add to that the possibility of secondary damage, maybe a cascade of blasts, if an internal fuel supply or critical installation was hit. From a strategic interior perspective, the operation required high-precision intelligence, knowing which tower, which floors or units to hit, how to avoid catastrophic civilian casualties or at least minimize unwanted blowback, how to time the attack when defenses were weak, how to ensure escape for friendly units or minimize unintended damage. It required coordination of intelligence gathering, strike assets, perhaps drones, missiles, or special forces, timing windows, electronic warfare, suppression of air defenses, real-time monitoring of the interior environment, heat signatures, smoke, human movement. Internally, the operation also had to manage damage control after the fact, rescue operations, containment of fire, information management, propaganda value, managing public shock. The interior story is about the human experience of the strike and the strategic depth of its planning. In sum, the interior portion reveals what happened inside the towers and what happened inside the minds of planners and executors of this audacious strike. It shows that when a building is targeted in a major city, the direct damage is only one side. The larger effect is disruption, fear, loss of critical infrastructure, psychological shock. So the interior narrative is indispensable for understanding the full weight of the event. Next, turning to performance, how well did this operation succeed relative to its objectives? The striking element is that the towers were hit in Moscow, a bold venue. Ukraine demonstrated long-range capability, the ability to penetrate air defenses, the willingness to strike symbolic targets, and the operational savvy to choose timing and location for maximum impact. From reports, we know that Ukrainian forces have in recent months struck energy, refinery, and pipeline targets within Russia. For example, Ukraine targeted Russian energy infrastructure and Moscow region facilities, and Russia claimed to have destroyed many of the incoming drones, yet still admitted incursions near Moscow. This suggests Ukraine's performance is rising. The performance here can be judged by achieving the strike inside Moscow, causing visible damage, creating a strong headline, forcing Russian defense systems to respond or show weakness, generating internal Russian anxiety, and boosting Ukrainian morale. On the flip side, performance must also be judged by costs. How many strike assets were lost? What's the diplomatic fallout? What civilian casualties may have occurred which might undermine legitimacy? And whether the intended message was fully delivered. Overall, this appears a high-performance operation for Ukraine, audacious, visible, impactful, safety features, in a war's own sense. This refers to how safety was managed for both the attacking side and for civilians/defenders. For the attacking side, safety means minimizing own casualties, minimizing exposure of strike units, maintaining operational secrecy, avoiding detection before the strike, protecting personnel and assets. The fact that the operation reached into Moscow indicates commendable safety planning by Ukraine in keeping its assets safe until the moment of attack. For the defenders/civilians, safety features relate to evacuation plans, fire suppression systems in the towers, air raid protocols, civilian shelter usage, rapid response of emergency services, structural resilience of the towers, and effective communication of risk. One weakness likely exposed, even a well-defended urban center like Moscow may have gaps in its protective safety features given that a strike got through. The event highlights the need for better civilian target rescue measures, building occupant training, rapid emergency response, and building infrastructure designed to manage internal disasters triggered by external attacks. From the attacker's perspective, safety features also include after-strike exit routes, suppression of counter-strike, and steps to manage potential retaliatory attacks. In sum, safety in this operation was multifaceted. For Ukraine, it meant securing its own forces. For Moscow and its towers, it meant managing the crisis and protecting occupants. And the strike showed that even major city safety systems can be vulnerable. Unique selling points of this event. What makes this strike stand out? First, it happened in Moscow. Very few times have strikes within the Russian capital been this visible or impactful, and that alone gives it a strategic and symbolic dimension. Second, the target is a high-rise tower, an iconic urban civilian/office structure, not just a military base or remote warehouse. That means the psychological impact is high. Third, the strike demonstrates the growing reach and sophistication of Ukraine's strike capabilities, not just in military terms, but in intelligence, planning, target selection, risk management. Fourth, the publicity value images of towers burning in Moscow will travel worldwide, influencing international perceptions, morale, support, and diplomacy. Fifth, the ripple effects this strike may prompt accelerated Russian defense upgrades, changes in civilian emergency protocols, greater international focus on the conflict, and could shift the calculus of what's considered safe territory. Sixth, the asymmetry Ukraine using relatively limited assets to strike deep inside suggests a cost-effective, high-impact strategy. Finally, the message that no place is entirely out of reach, that the war is not limited to the front lines, and that strategic centers can be targeted, which may cause Moscow recalculations. So the USB of this strike are both tactical and symbolic. Price, costs, consequences. Every operation comes at a cost. For Ukraine, the cost may include use of high-value strike assets, potential escalation by Russia retaliation, diplomatic or legal ramifications of hitting structures in a capital city, possibly with civilian presence, risk to intelligence and personnel assets. There might also be logistical and supply chain costs, increased exposure of Ukraine's strike forces, increased targeting of Ukrainian assets by Russia in response. For Moscow and Russia, the price is more visible. Damage to a major tower, disruption of offices, firefighting costs, evacuation costs, loss of productivity, increased civilian panic, reputational damage domestically and internationally, increased defense spending, possible loss of life, injury, and the strategic cost of admitting vulnerability. On a broader scale, the cost to the region may include increased air raid alerts, evacuation of urban centers, economic losses, insurance impacts, interruption of business operations, increased risk premiums. The price of asserting that even the capital is vulnerable may also escalate the conflict further, potentially leading to broader warfare, more civilian suffering, greater regional instability. So while the strike achieves many of its objectives, it also carries risks and costs politically, militarily, economically, humanly that must be weighed. The notion of price reminds us that war is not cost-free. Conclusion. In closing, this strike by Ukraine on towers in Moscow is a landmark event. It demonstrates that Ukraine is not just reacting defensively, but is capable of reaching deep into Russia, targeting symbolic structures, and altering the psychological and strategic landscape of the war. The exterior damage shows boldness. The interior narrative reveals depth of planning and human impact. The performance metrics suggest a high-success operation. The safety features highlight both strengths and weaknesses in urban defense and attack planning. The unique selling points showcase why this strike matters far beyond the immediate damage, and the price reminds us that every action in war has consequences. For viewers, what this means is that the war is evolving. Front lines are not just geographic zones, they are mental and symbolic spaces. Urban centers are no longer completely safe. Strategy is increasingly about perception, reach, and disruption rather than mere territory. As we watch developments, this event will likely provoke responses. Russia may step up its air defense, review its urban safety protocols, rethink its minimal risk areas. Ukraine may continue exploiting its reach, use strikes as both military and strategic messaging tools. The world will be watching, other nations will reassess risk, and civilians in cities will feel the war's proximity more keenly. Thank you for joining this deep review. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Russia's next move will be? Will Ukraine escalate further? Let us know below. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next video.